I want to talk about a press conference that was held the other day. I happened to catch it on YouTube, and you can see it up there. There was no way to comment. The comments have been disabled. It's too bad because there could be some pretty funny comments. But anyway, this was a press conference, I think, at Princeton with Nobel Prize winning economists there to answer questions, right, about the U.S. economy, including the two most recent recipients of the Nobel Prize in Economics. So they were both there to answer questions. And I don't know, they had maybe 50 reporters there that were going to ask, this brain trust, right? These are the smartest of the smart, right? These are all the people that have won Nobel Prizes in economics. So clearly, these are the guys that know the answers, right? They've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about the economy. After all, they are economists by profession. So they've been thinking about the economy, thinking about our problems, and of course they're here for a press conference. So clearly they had some extra preparation because they're going to a conference to answer questions from the press, about the economy. After all, I'm assuming they know that they're going to get questions on the economy. They're Nobel Prize winners in economics, so I'm assuming they don't think they're going to be getting questions, on sports or, on the arts or, film or stuff like that, right? They pretty much know that they're there to talk about the economy and, the U.S. economy, obviously, because it's a press conference in America. Anyway, so the first question that's really asked from the audience, and we're going to play that question. Basically, hey, what's going on in the economy? Or do you agree with what the president has done? Do you agree with the Fed? What's your take on the economic situation? Very reasonable question. So let's hear this question. It's cut number 11.
I wanted to see your opinion about what the government has done so far in the United States to support the economy. If you think it has been appropriate, how can we actually support the economy, create jobs? Those questions everybody are asking themselves.
Okay, so that's just a question. All right, now, very legitimate question. All right, so let's hear how Professor Chris Sims, who is Christopher Sims. He's a professor at Princeton University, 68-year-old, a co-winner of the Nobel Prize for Economics. I think he just was announced the winner. I think it was just last week. So he's been asked a poignant question. What do you think about the U.S. economy? Have we done the right thing so far? Should we do something different? What do you think? Here is his carefully considered response.
I think part of the point of this prize and the area that we work in is that that answers to questions like that require careful thinking, a lot of data analysis, and that the answers are not likely to be simple. So that asking Tom and me for answers off the top of our heads to these questions is you shouldn't expect much from us.
Before he answered that question, or rather didn't answer that question, there was a very large and noticeable pause because there was a bunch of blank stares, not only from this professor, but from everyone on the panel. And the press, the members of the press that were there broke out in laughter. And so before he even answered this question, the whole room was laughing at the fact that nobody could come up with an answer. And only after a long, pregnant pause and a bunch of laughter did Professor Sims opine. And basically what he said was, hey, these are complicated questions. You can't expect me to answer them off the top of my head. What do you mean, off the top of his head? This guy is a professional economist. You telling me that for the past 2 or 3 years, he hasn't even thought about the U.S. economy? He hasn't even considered whether or not what the government has done or what the Federal Reserve has done is the appropriate response, whether or not maybe we should have done something different. He hasn't even spent any time thinking about, what he would propose. Not a minute off the top of my head. He comes to a press conference on economics. Again, didn't he think he was going to get asked a question about the U.S. economy? As if he hadn't already prepared, he would have at least prepared yesterday and thought about these things. But how can you even believe for a second that he had never even thought about this issue? After all, even those second graders had thought about the economic crisis, right? And they even had some answers, right? They came up with stuff like glow-in-the-dark pants. This Nobel Prize winner in economics, he didn't even have that. He didn't even have glow-in-the-dark pants. He had nothing. You know what he said? He said that he needed time to compile all the data into a complicated program, run it through some kind of models, and come up with some idea. I mean, if he actually understood any economics, he wouldn't have to do that. But of course, why didn't he already do it? If he can find a solution to our economic problems by crunching numbers through some program, what's he waiting for? It's been over 2 years. Yet this guy's got a Nobel Prize in economics. Yet over the past 2 or 3 years, he hasn't even spent 1 minute thinking about the economic problems of the United States or trying to figure out what his answer might be. Now, after he basically says, I can't answer the question, you can't expect me to answer the question off the top of my head, because, of course, I haven't thought about it at all. Don't put me on the spot here at a press conference about the economy and expect me to answer a question on the economy. But anyway, listen to what his buddy, right, this is his co-winner of the Nobel Prize, Professor Thomas Sargent from NYU. Listen to what this great economic mind has to say.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Maybe I was hoping you were going to ask about Europe, but
I think one of the privileges of being a Nobel laureate is if you want to answer a question about Europe, you can do that.
But let me.
One of the other privileges of being a Nobel laureate is you don't have to know anything about economics. So after the other Nobel Prize winner says he's got nothing, he hasn't given any thought to our economic problems and he has no solutions, the other guy says, yeah, I got nothing to add. And then he comes in and says, I was hoping you'd ask me about Europe. About Europe? What about America? I mean, this is an economic conference in the U.S. about America. It's not about Europe. Of course, later on, someone does ask about Europe, and he doesn't have an answer there either.
Do you want to say something about Europe?
That's on, maybe if somebody asks that. Maybe.
Okay, someone has a microphone.
What about Europe?
Nicely done.
Chris?
Anyway, this real stuff is unbelievable. You can see the whole charade up on YouTube. If they'd have had me up there, I don't have a Nobel Prize, but I do have answers, and I can make them off the top of my head, because I have thought about this stuff, and I do have valid criticisms of Bernanke and the government, and I have real solutions based on a real knowledge of economics. I may not have a Nobel Prize, but I got some street smarts. Anyway, we'll be right back. We'll be taking your calls here on shiftradio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.
One of the journalists who's following us on Facebook asks whether you can say anything about whether there are any particular impacts of your work on Latin American economies.
Chris? Yeah, I don't know.
The Peter Schiff Show.